for having us. I'm Mariana. As Bruno said, I'm a product designer at OutSystems, and this is my colleague, Maria.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria. I'm a UX UI designer at OutSystems also, and we're super excited to be here.
Today, in our talk, as you can see by the title, Building Mobile UI by Uniting Design and Dev, we'll share with you a bit the process of creating a UI framework from scratch. More specifically, we'll share the work that we did to solve a pain point that we believe is familiar to many of you, the disconnect between design and development. We'll be sharing some of the lessons and the systems that we use to minimize this gap. So this is what we'll cover. We'll do a quick introduction about us and about OutSystems. Then we'll talk about one of the challenges that we faced when we started this work, the journey of building a UI framework, the lessons that we learned and some insights, and we'll wrap up with what's next. So yeah, let's go. Let's begin with the introduction. Maria.
Hi everyone. So my name is Maria João Abrantes. I'm a senior UX UI designer at OutSystems, and I've been working with digital products for over 7 years now. And I've been working across different industries, from SaaS platforms to mobile apps and design systems. Over the past 4 years, I've also been mentoring design students, which has been a really fun way to share what I've learned and to keep up with the fresh ideas in the field.
Okay, and I'm Mariana Bexiga. I'm a senior product designer. I also work at OutSystems. I have background in computer science, and for the last 5 years, I've been designing experiences for low-code developers. Okay, so now let's introduce OutSystems. OutSystems is a low-code platform. You can think of it as a tool that lets companies build, change, and deploy applications very fast. We have a global community of over 850,000 people who publish thousands of applications. So there's nearly 1 million people relying on our work. And for us as a design team, it's a huge responsibility to support this ecosystem. Me and Maria, we are part of OutSystems UX group. That's a big group. And we work at the app experience team. The core mission of this team is to design the framework that enables OutSystems users to build amazing applications. So this means that we need to support all the personas that use the framework when they are working on an OutSystems project. So we need to have the experience for the designer, for the developer, and for the end user. We take care of the entire user journey. We start with the designer. For the designer, we provide all the foundations as a Figma kit. This is where our designers get access to all the reusable UI components, all the assets that they need to build screens and user flows for OutSystems applications. This is typically the starting point for all new OutSystems app projects. Then we have the developer. And the developer builds the application that was designed in Figma by the designer using OutSystems Studio. Studio is one of OutSystems' main products. This is where the developers drag and drop the components to build the screens. They also implement the logic and take care of the data of their application. So our team is also responsible for the experience of using the components when the developer is working in Studio, so the developer experience. Finally, we have the end user. And the end user is the persona that interacts with the application that was developed in OutSystems. Our team is also responsible, since we work on the framework, for guaranteeing the best possible experience for anyone that is using an application that was made in OutSystems. We need to guarantee that if the application was built with the framework, it's cohesive, it's fast, whether it's running on a browser or as a mobile application.
Exactly. So now let's talk a little bit about the challenge that we faced. So what Mariana just explained is the current workflow of a typical OutSystems project. So although in order for designers to be able to design easily for OutSystems apps, they need access to what's inside of Studio, right? So we're talking about the components, the styles, and all of that. And that's exactly when OutSystems UI comes in. So this is the current UI framework for OutSystems generated apps. When it was launched in 2019, it quickly became a game changer, providing over 80 web responsive UI patterns. It's an incredible tool that has been used in over 1,000 apps in production and has received continuous updates over the years. Plus, it's been duplicated by over 9,000 users in Figma, which proves the huge reliance that people have on this tool. Although sometimes one size doesn't fit all. So even though OutSystems UI was incredibly robust for a web responsive UI framework, it didn't really cater to mobile-specific use cases. So what I'm talking about here is everything that usually concerns specifically mobile apps, such as smooth mobile navigation and transitions, native swiping gestures, and specific mobile patterns and behaviors like bottom bars, bottom sheets, and such. So in the end, when users wanted to build mobile apps, designers and developers would oftentimes have to research, design, and develop the patterns from scratch, leading to inconsistencies and overall just a broken workflow. So entering mobile UI, we needed a dedicated, high-quality mobile experience. We needed something that was built and thought of for mobile since day one, that would enable our users of creating amazing mobile-specific products. And from this point onwards, this new UI framework was born. So our goal was to create something that would be able to compete with market-leading apps like Uber, Airbnb, Spotify, and while at the same time providing a collaborative workflow from beginning to end to our designers and developers that were using mobile UI. So the good news was that we didn't need to start from scratch because OutSystems UI was so widely used. That meant that we were able to start off with a massive amount of data from several different channels. We had data from every user persona using our UI framework, enabling us to audit the whole workflow from beginning to end and basically pinpoint every pain we came across. We invested a lot of time and energy into understanding what was going well and what could be improved from our existing experience in a way so that we could deliver the best solution possible. So now the main question here was to figure out how designers and developers were feeling about the current experience and to learn with them about what could actually be improved. So we reached out to both and we mapped out the whole workflow and gathered basically every insight we could. So here we have what's the typical workflow of OutSystems users during a project. So after designers have gathered all the app requirements and overall briefing from their stakeholders, they move on to the Figma community and they duplicate the UI kit. Designers will apply customer branding, so we're talking about fonts, colors, shapes, and whatnot. They will design the screens and the overall required flows. And lastly, they will hand off their work to the developers. And here is a bit where things start going south. Well, normally developers would basically translate everything they see in Figma to the project in Studio. So again, implement the foundations in code, so the color, the shape, all of that. They will customize the components and develop the app screens, logic, and so on. And then eventually, all of this goes up to the eventual release of the app. The problem was right here, as I mentioned, in the handoff. So when the developer takes the design, because what the developer would see in the design files was not directly translatable to what was available in Studio. So there was a big disconnection between what the designer would see when they were working with our framework in Figma and what the developer would see when, again, they were working with our framework in Studio. This meant that what was designed was very difficult translated into code because of a series of mislinks. We were able to divide these mislinks into two main issues. So the first one is fragmented language, and the second one is closed components. Starting from the first one. So when we talk about the fragmented language, what we mean is we had issues with both naming properties and variants, and also we had uncontrolled values because there was no tokens implemented. On the other hand, when we're talking about closed components, we mean that components were built in an inflexible way that made designers and developers' work difficult and really time-consuming. So soon we're going to show you exactly how we solved both of these problems.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about building mobile UI, and more specifically about building mobile UI having these two problems that Maria highlighted in mind, so by uniting designers and developers. So let's start from the beginning of our journey. As soon as we understood that there was this disconnection between our users when they were working on their projects, we knew that we wanted this new framework for it to be successful. We knew that we had to focus on building strong foundations. You can have a beautiful building, but if the foundations are weak, the whole building is going to be unstable and eventually fall down. So we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to build something that was future-proof. So from the beginning, our core mission became clear. We needed to ensure that every layer was stable, was scalable, and was built for collaboration. So this means that mobile UI, the framework that we are building, it needed to be the intersection of two critical goals. As a first thought, we needed to tackle the design and development collaboration issues that we found. So the left yellow circle. Because if we didn't, our final product wouldn't fully address the needs of our users. And then, of course, we also needed to deliver best-in-class mobile experiences for the end user. That's also one of the main goals of this project. So it was not enough only to address the second one, the blue circle. Mobile UI needed to solve both these problems simultaneously. Something that we also wanted to highlight is that mobile UI, so what we are building is a UI framework, not a design system. This means that our users, they will work on top of what we offer. They'll change the colors, the typography, they'll customize the components, they'll adapt the kit to their needs. So they'll basically build their own design system on top of our framework. And having this in mind shaped our approach and the work that we did, because we needed to guarantee that mobile UI was a stable and flexible base where users could do all that they needed and where they had enough flexibility to apply the customer's branding. So that being said, most of the work that we did for mobile UI focused on building the right architecture, the tokens, the puzzle pieces, so that our users could easily achieve what they needed. We didn't just focus on the aesthetic parts of the work. If we go back to the issues that Maria told you about, let's start with the first one, the fragmented language. If you remember, this was happening because we had different experiences in Figma and in Studio. I'm going to give you more detail about this. Basically, in our previous kit, we lacked tokens. And this was possibly one of the biggest contributors for the fragmented language problem. There was basically no single source of truth, and it was incredibly hard for our users, for both designers and developers, to communicate clearly among themselves when they were working on a project. As you can imagine, propagating any change was a struggle, and it led to massive rework and wasted time. So this was happening in the past. Another challenge that our users had was the fact that the properties and the variants that we offered in Figma were different from what the developers saw in Studio. And this also forced our developers to spend extra time matching the properties, sometimes guessing the correct implementation. They had to interrupt the design team. And of course, this also led to friction in the process. So what did we do in this new UI framework to unify the language? The first thing that we did was implement design tokens. We knew that this was going to be important for the framework. So we took our time and we were intentional in the structure that we built. We tokenized everything to ensure consistency. So not only color, but also motion, spacing, border, typography, almost everything as a token to ensure this consistency. We avoided having component-specific tokens. Our system was already complex, and we wanted to avoid creating a very long list of tokens. So to keep the system easy to understand and to maintain and to evolve, we decided to go only with primitive and semantic tokens. We also, most of the time, we used contextual scales for the token names. We thought about possible evolutions of the UI framework and the work that our users typically do in their projects. So to avoid naming problems in the future, we decided to go with numeric scales instead of abstract names. So small, medium, most of the times we use numeric scales. Finally, we enforced simplicity in our token structure. We did this two ways with easy to learn names so that anyone that is starting a new project using mobile UI knows exactly what the token does and its purpose, and by proactively removing all the tokens that were not being used. So yeah, we implemented our tokens. We wanted to also share a quick note about our own process. While we were implementing tokens, we leveraged Token Studio for true version control during our development. This is a Figma plugin, and it basically allowed us to store all the design tokens directly in a GitHub repository. And this way, every time that Maria needed to update a color, for instance, in Figma, that change was committed to Git, and our developers were able to pull the most recent design values directly into their code base. In our kit for the users, we have the corresponding version via Figma variables available for them to use. Okay, regarding the properties and the names, what did we do? For mobile UI, we now ensure that the properties in Figma match what's done in Studio. We did this so that the designer and the developer are always talking about the same exact concept. To guarantee this, all the teams involved, so UI design, developer experience, and development, all of us, we needed to be aligned and always talking and checking each other's work to guarantee that the concept was kept across the whole experience. So this was how we fixed the fragmented language problem.
Okay, so, sorry, let me change windows. All right, so now that the fragmented language issue is done, let's move on to the next one, which is the closed components. This was our second main issue that we found with our previous UI framework. So in other words, basically we're talking about components that were not flexible enough to be customized without having to detach them or to create them from scratch. So simply put, a good UI framework provides flexible pieces that can be used in multiple ways. We don't need 30 different cards in a UI framework. We basically need one good card that allows for deep customization. And we want components that make it easy for us to design multiple patterns from a single one. So this makes the work easier, the framework's leaner, and basically accounts also for all proficiency levels in Figma. For this, we needed a set of things like auto layout, we need an inner structure in place, and the possibility to switch instances inside of the component. So when we're talking about closed components, we're talking about when we don't have that, whether because it lacks the structure or doesn't have enough variants, or the internal instances we can play with are not there. So this limits our ability to support multiple design use cases from a single component and eventually forces us to detach the component. Obviously, by doing that, our devs are going to lose the link to the library and eventually all hell breaks loose. So how can we offer flexible components? Well, we intentionally added slots in every component where designers might need to add custom content, such as models content or cards details. Think of components that can basically have anything inside of them. That's where we added slots. So here is an example of a nodal. And here you can see multiple slots for content. So they can be visible or they can be hidden. And when they are visible, you can basically swap the instances and add anything you'd like, making it flexible and easy to use. So this is exactly how it works on the design side. Let's see how does it translate into the dev side. So because nobody was going around detaching components, devs can now see exactly which components we're using, which properties are being used, and so on. In order to keep consistency and keep working again on our unified language, we worked to map out the same experience, but now on the studio side. So this way, the same concept of slots previously seen in Figma can now be seen in Studio right here. So it's the same mental model, it's just a different platform. And this is exactly the connection between design and development that guarantees the flexibility and the alignments throughout a whole project. So here you have it. This is Mobile UI. This is a framework created with collaboration in mind for everyone using it. And so with all of this work, what has changed for designers? We now have direct mapping from design to the development stage. This basically results in easier handoffs, effortless updates across designs, and overall accelerated design creations. On the development side, we have better communication and faster deliveries. We have less rework and uncertainty, and overall easier scalability. And last but not least, what about our end users? So because of the linear workflow mentioned before, we now have a more cohesive app experience, which is delivered faster to our end user. We have more delightful experiences that match market expectations. And most important of all, we have apps that feel natural and native. So after all this work, we have researched our predicted impact with Mobile UI, and we have some data here to show you today. So by enabling the slots concept, we are aiming a reduction of 70% of cases where designers need to detach components in Figma. And this is really, really good news. And by establishing better alignment through cohesive mapping, we predict a reduction of 40% in the average time that it takes for developers to implement complex components. And finally, because of our token implementation, we predict a reduction of 30% in style deviation between design and the final product. So overall, this is extremely good news for both designers and developers.
So yeah, let's talk about what we learned while building a UI framework from scratch. The first thing that we learned, surprise, surprise, is that collaboration is key. Our focus was to help our users collaborate better. And while we were finding solutions to help them, we understood that we also had to improve our own internal collaboration. As you can imagine, this was a big project with 4 years of ongoing work, a lot of people involved from multiple areas. So making sure that we were all aligned and that we knew exactly what others were doing was very important to achieve a cohesive result and to guarantee that we were delivering the right thing. So we wanted to show you, this is what the collaborative process actually looks like. This is our internal workflow for building a UI component. It's a process with many stages for component design, designer experience, developer experience, and development. So it's a very complex people with many people involved. And as you can see, is a process that has several peer reviews and end-of sessions to get feedback, to really involve everyone and guarantee that there's no guessing, so that we are all in the same page.
All right, so our second takeaway from this was actually quite simple. And we came back to something we already knew, but we were forced to revisit, which was the UI components are really just a very tiny piece of the puzzle that is a UI framework. So as we know, a framework is the basic structure underlying a system. And it can be composed by several little pieces that, when are connected well, they will work well together. But when they are thought of individually and not as the system they live in, they will probably fall apart. So that's why it's super important to look at a system as a whole instead of just focusing on the separate parts. This way we can really see the bigger picture. And for us, that was working on the structure, the logic, and the architecture of our UI framework before we even considered how beautiful our UI components could be. So finally, what is next for Mobile UI? So first things first, Mobile UI hasn't been released yet. We will have to hold on until the beginning of next year for that. So be sure to follow our work on LinkedIn and the OutSystems pages so you're being kept on the loop. We already have studies on the dark theme. Thanks to our token system, we expect that developing it will be pretty straightforward. And of course, once we launch the kit, then the real fun will begin. We will be able to see how our users are interacting with it. We'll be able to collect feedback, and finally, we can iterate the framework as needed. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. Me and Mariana are really excited to work on the final tweaks of these kits. And it's been a pleasure to share with you all about the process and what we've learned from it. If you have any questions, leave them in the chat so we can come back to them later, and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.